The phone call came on a Tuesday night at 11 p.m. Private Henderson, this is Gunnery Sergeant Rourke. From Paris Island, 1989. I need to see you. Tonight if possible. There's something I need to tell you before I die. I hadn't heard that voice in 35 years, but I recognized it instantly. The voice that had screamed at me for 13 weeks of boot camp. The voice that had broken me down and built me back up into a Marine. The voice that belonged to the man I'd both feared and respected more than anyone else in my life. Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Rourke, my drill instructor. And he was calling me at 11 p.m. saying he needed to confess something before he died. Gunny? Is that really you? It's me, Henderson. I know it's late. I know this is out of the blue. But I'm dying. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Maybe 2 months left. And there's something I need to tell you. Something about your time at Paris Island. Something I should have told you 35 years ago. My mind was racing. What is it? What do you need to tell me? Not over the phone. I need to see you in person. I'm in town. Drove 6 hours to find you. I'm at the Starlight Diner on Route 40. Can you come? Please. This can't wait. The desperation in his voice was alarming. Gunnery Sergeant Rourke had never sounded desperate. Never sounded uncertain. He'd been pure confidence and authority. The embodiment of Marine Corps discipline. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I told my wife I had an emergency, grabbed my keys and drove to the diner, trying to imagine what could be so urgent that my drill instructor from 35 years ago needed to confess to me before dying. I found him in a back booth, and the sight shocked me. The powerful, intimidating man who'd terrorized recruits at Paris Island was now a frail shadow. Cancer had stolen his bulk and strength, leaving behind someone who looked decades older than 76. But his eyes, those steel-gray eyes that had stared through countless recruits, still held that same intensity. "Henderson," he said, attempting to stand. "Thank you for coming. Don't get up, Gunny." I slid into the booth across from him. "You said you're dying. Doctors give me 8 weeks, maybe 10. Long enough to make things right if I work fast, which is why I'm here." He pushed a worn envelope across the table. "This is documentation of something that happened during your cycle at Paris Island. 3rd Battalion, Platoon 3086, summer 1989, your platoon." I remembered. 13 weeks of hell that transformed me from a teenager into a Marine. One of the hardest experiences of my life, but also one of the most meaningful. What about it? Gunny Rourke's hands were shaking as he reached for his coffee. "What I'm about to tell you, it's going to change how you remember those 13 weeks, change how you think about your time in the Corps. And I'm sorry for that. But I can't die carrying this secret. Can't meet my maker without confessing what I did. Gunny, you're scaring me. What did you do?" He took a deep breath. "Your platoon had an incident during training. Week 8, the Crucible. Remember that?" I did. The Crucible. 54 hours of intense training designed to test everything we'd learned. Sleep deprivation, physical challenges, team-building exercises. The culmination of boot camp before we earned the title of Marine. I remember. Toughest 54 hours of my life. Do you remember Private Allen? James Allen from Ohio. The name triggered a memory I'd buried. Yeah, he quit during the Crucible. Rang out. Said he couldn't handle it. We never saw him again after that." Gunny Rourke's face twisted with pain. "That's not what happened. That's the story I told your platoon. But it's not the truth." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean? Allen didn't quit. He died. During the Crucible. And I covered it up." The diner seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "What? 3rd night of the Crucible. 0200 hours. You and the platoon were doing the night navigation exercise. Allen collapsed. Full cardiac arrest. He was 19 years old and his heart just stopped." Gunny Rourke's voice was shaking now. "I performed CPR, did everything I was trained to do, but he was gone. Dead right there on that training field. A 19-year-old kid who'd survived 8 weeks of boot camp only to die 50 yards from earning the title. Oh my God." I radioed for medical. They arrived within 10 minutes, confirmed he was dead. Then the senior staff got involved. And they made a decision. He pulled out documents from the envelope, medical reports, incident forms, communications logs, all classified and dated 1989. The decision was to cover it up, to classify Allen's death as a training dropout, to tell the platoon he'd quit during the Crucible and been sent home, to list him in official records as a voluntary discharge rather than a training fatality. Why? Why would they do that? Because Paris Island was under scrutiny. There'd been several training deaths in the previous years. Congress was investigating. Media was watching. The commandant had ordered 0 tolerance for training casualties. And here we had a cardiac death during the most publicized part of boot camp. Gunny Rourke looked like he was going to be sick. So the brass decided to bury it, literally and figuratively. Allen's body was shipped home to his family, with a story about him washing out of training due to medical reasons. They told his parents he'd developed a heart condition that disqualified him from service. Paid them off quietly. Made the whole thing disappear. And my platoon? We never knew? You never knew. I gathered everyone after the exercise and told you Allen had quit. that he couldn't hack it mentally and had been removed from training. And all of you believed me, because drill instructors don't lie to their recruits. He started crying, actual tears from a man I'd never seen show weakness. Except I did lie. I lied to 73 young men who trusted me. I told you that one of your brothers had quit when really he died, and I've carried that lie for 35 years. I sat there trying to process this. Alan hadn't quit, he'd died. And everyone from our platoon had spent 35 years believing he'd been weak, had failed where we'd succeeded. Did anyone else know? Any of the other recruits? No. You were all separated during the navigation exercise. By the time you reassembled, Alan's body was gone, and my story was the only explanation you had. What about the other drill instructors? They knew. Staff Sergeant Michaels, Sergeant Diaz, they were both in on it. They're dead now. Michaels died in a car accident in 1995. Diaz had a stroke in 2012. I'm the last one left who knows the truth. Gunny Rourke slid more papers across the table. These are copies of the real documentation. The medical examiner's report showing cardiac arrest. The communications between Parris Island Command and Marine Corps Headquarters. The agreement with Alan's family. Proof of everything I'm telling you. I looked through the documents with shaking hands. They confirmed his story. James Allen, age 19, had died of sudden cardiac arrest during the crucible at Parris Island on August 23, 1989. Official record. Voluntary medical discharge. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm dying, and because you deserve to know the truth. Your whole platoon deserves to know. You spent 35 years thinking Alan was weak, that he quit when things got hard. But he didn't quit. He died trying to become a Marine, and he deserves to be remembered accurately. Also, his voice dropped even lower. Also because I need forgiveness. I need someone from that platoon to know what I did, and to tell me whether I'm a monster, or just a man who made terrible choices under impossible circumstances. You want me to forgive you for lying to us for 35 years? I want you to understand why I lied. And maybe, if you can, to understand that I've been in hell ever since. Every single Marine I trained after your platoon, I saw Alan's face. Every graduation I attended, I wondered if he would have made it. Every time someone thanked me for making them a Marine, I thought about the one kid I failed. Ginny Rourke pulled out a photograph, our platoon on graduation day. 73 newly minted Marines in dress blues. Alan wasn't in the photo because we'd believed he'd quit weeks earlier. I have this picture in my wallet, have carried it for 35 years, and every time I look at it I count 73 men and think about the one who should be 74. Why didn't you refuse? Why didn't you tell the truth when it happened? Because I was a gunnery sergeant. Because colonels and generals were giving me orders. Because I was told that revealing the truth would damage the Marine Corps, would hurt recruiting, would result in congressional investigations that could shut down Parris Island. And because I was a coward, I told myself I was following orders, protecting the institution. But really I was protecting my career. If I'd refused to go along with the cover-up, I'd have been forced out. So I chose my career over honoring a dead recruit. The waitress came by to refill coffee. We waited in silence until she left. Did Alan's family know the truth? They knew he died. But they were told it was an undiagnosed heart condition, that he'd collapsed and died despite immediate medical attention, that it was tragic but unavoidable. They weren't told about the cover-up or the false discharge record. They were paid a settlement and asked to sign non-disclosure agreements. The Marine Corps bought their silence. The Marine Corps gave them enough money to not ask questions and threatened them with legal action if they did. Alan's father was former Army. He understood how the military works, took the money and kept quiet. Are they still alive? His mother is 79 years old, living in Ohio. His father died in 2003. No siblings. Alan was an only child. His mother is the only family left who remembers him. Gunny Rourke pushed another paper across the table. This is her address, her phone number. I found her 6 months ago when my diagnosis came through. Haven't contacted her yet. Was waiting to talk to someone from the platoon first. What do you want me to do? I want you to help me tell the truth. Contact the other men from platoon 3086. Tell them what really happened to Alan. Give them the opportunity to honor his memory properly instead of remembering him as someone who quit. And then I want to contact Alan's mother. Tell her the full truth. Not just that her son died, but that he died trying to become a Marine. That he didn't quit or fail. That he gave everything he had and his heart literally gave out. This will destroy your legacy. Everyone who remembers you as a drill instructor will know you lied. My legacy is already destroyed. I'm a liar who covered up a recruit's death. The only question is whether I die as a liar who never confessed or as a liar who finally told the truth. I looked at the documents spread across the table. Proof of a death that had been erased. Proof of a cover-up that had lasted 35 years. Proof that my drill instructor, the man who taught me about honor and integrity, had spent decades living a fundamental lie. I need time to process this, to think about what telling the truth accomplishes versus what it costs. I understand. But Henderson, I don't have much time. Maybe 2 months. If we're going to do this, it needs to be soon. Let me ask you something. Do you think Alan would want this exposed? Would he want his death used to challenge the institution he died trying to join? Gunny Rourke thought about that. I think Alan would want his brothers to know he didn't quit. I think he'd want the truth told rather than a comfortable lie. But I could be wrong. I've been wrong about a lot of things. We sat for another hour while Gunny told me everything he remembered about that night. Alan collapsing during navigation. The desperate CPR attempts. The medics arriving. The command staff making their decision. The agreement to classify it as a voluntary discharge. I see him sometimes, Gunny said quietly. In dreams. He's always 19, always in those camouflage utilities. And he always asks me the same question. Why did you tell them I quit, Gunny? And I never have a good answer. Maybe that's my punishment. 35 years of that dream. 35 years of lying to that kid's ghost every night. When we finally left the diner, Gunny gave me copies of all the documentation. Made me promise I'd at least consider telling the truth, even if I ultimately decided against it. Whatever you decide, I respect it, he said as we stood in the parking lot. But please, make an actual decision. Don't just avoid it. That's what I did for 35 years and it's destroyed me. Over the next weeks, I wrestled with what to do. I tracked down other members of Platoon 3086, found that most had gone on to successful military careers. Several had retired as senior enlisted or officers. None of them knew the truth about Alan. I contacted 5 of them, told them what Gunny had confessed. Their reactions varied. Some were angry at the betrayal. Some were sympathetic to the impossible position Gunny had been in. All agreed that Alan deserved to be remembered accurately. Together, we made a decision. We would tell the truth, but carefully. We'd contact Alan's mother privately, tell her the full story about her son's death. We'd create a memorial for Alan within our platoon, a recognition that he died trying to become a Marine, not that he quit. But we wouldn't go public, wouldn't expose the cover-up to media or demand official investigations. Too many people had died or retired. The institution had changed since 1989. Exposing the cover-up now would accomplish little except damaging the Marine Corps and the memory of everyone involved. I called Gunny to tell him our decision. He was grateful, relieved that we'd found a middle path between complete silence and complete exposure. Thank you, he said, his voice weak. Thank you for giving Alan some measure of justice while showing mercy to an old man who made terrible choices. Together with 2 other platoon members, I visited Alan's mother in Ohio. We told her everything, how her son had died, how the death had been covered up, how Gunny was now confessing with his dying breath. She cried, not because she was learning her son had died, she'd known that for 35 years, but because she was learning he'd died with honor, pushing himself to the limit to earn the title of Marine. They told me he had a weak heart, she said. Told me he couldn't cut it physically. I always wondered if maybe he'd quit and they just made up the medical story to spare my feelings. Now I know, he didn't quit, he died trying, and that means everything. We held a private memorial for Alan. 15 members of Platoon 3086 came. We shared memories of training, of the kid who'd been funny and determined and had died doing something he believed in. We presented Alan's mother with a memorial plaque. It read, Private James Allen, USMC, did not quit, did not fail, died earning the title, Semper Fidelis. She held that plaque and sobbed. 35 years of believing her son hadn't been strong enough, and now learning he'd been strong enough to die trying. Gunny Rourke attended the memorial in a wheelchair, too weak to stand. When Alan's mother saw him, I thought she might be angry. Instead, she walked over and took his hand. Thank you for telling the truth, she said. Thank you for letting my son be remembered properly. Gunny died 6 weeks later. At his funeral, we told the truth about Platoon 3086 and Private Allen. Told how Gunny had carried crushing guilt for 35 years. Told how he'd used his dying months to make things right. Some people were angry. How dare he cover up a death? Lie to recruits, prioritize the institution over truth. Others were sympathetic. He'd been following orders, protecting the Corps, living with the consequences every day since. Both reactions were valid. Gunny had made terrible choices for understandable reasons. He'd lived with crushing guilt, and he'd finally found the courage to confess. Alan's mother requested that Gunny be buried with Marine Corps honors despite the controversy. He failed my son, she said, but he spent 35 years punishing himself for it. And at the end he told the truth. That counts for something. I think about Alan sometimes, about a 19-year-old who pushed himself so hard his heart gave out, about how close he came to earning the title, just 50 yards from the finish line. And I think about Gunny, about impossible choices made under pressure, about living with guilt for 35 years, about finding the courage to confess even though confession offered no redemption, only acknowledgement. Platoon 3086 graduated 73 Marines in 1989. The official record says we started with 74 and one recruit dropped out during training. The truth is we started with 74 and one recruit died trying to become one of us. His name was James Allen. He didn't quit. He didn't fail. His heart gave out while his spirit was still fighting. And now, 35 years later, we finally remember him correctly. It's not justice. Justice would have been Allen surviving, graduating, living a full life, but it's truth. Finally told, finally acknowledged, finally honored. And sometimes, that's all we can offer the dead honest memory, instead of comfortable lies. Semper Fidelis. Private Allen. You earned the title, even if you never got to wear it.